Welcome to Lean Agile Management Podcast, a show by Kanbanize that helps you boost work efficiency, create a culture of high performance, and build teams that thrive. Welcome to the Lamp.
Hello everyone, my name is Dimitar, I'm from Kanbanize, and today I'm joined by Keith Howlles and Angeline Thorne from Project 4 Learning Lab. Hey guys, how are you today?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm very happy to have you on our podcast, Project 4 Learning and Kanbanize. We've been partners for a while now. We've had some great successes. We've done some amazing things together. And I'm happy that we can share this knowledge with the world today. But before we start, could you let us know, how did you come up with your name? What does Project 4 Learning Lab mean?
Oh, now you're asking. What a question.
I'll let you answer that one.
That's right. Yeah. So we spun off the company from a sister company called Project 7 Consultancy. And their specialism has been in the application of lean in the context of operational excellence, so factories and things like that. And we obviously knew that all the principles apply in transactional and knowledge work, and we wanted to take that learning and apply it in a new context, building on our experience. So we needed a project number, and 4 happened to be available, and we quite liked the idea of Project 4 Learning and setting ourselves up as a learning lab, because life's about learning. So Project 4 Learning Lab was born.
Great start. You mentioned manufacturing and lean, and one of the biggest topics, even when Toyota started with it, was the pull principle. A lot of the modern manufacturing is based on producing just in time what the clients want, right? And coming from my own experience with Kanbanize, this hasn't been so mainstream in the knowledge work domain, I should say. So could you please share, do you teach those things with your clients in the knowledge work domain? And if you do, how do you do it? Please help me in those conversations when we have it with customers.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I think it's pretty counterintuitive actually to a lot of people in knowledge management, because you kind of brought up on the mantra, the sooner I start something, the sooner I'm going to finish it. That's kind of, and if I'm a project manager, if I know that someone started on my project, then it's probably going to get finished sooner, right? That's the kind of the tapes that we've got going on in our head a lot. So it can be quite hard, like you say, in knowledge management, I think, to kind of break people away from that kind of, that belief system. So I think, we do a mixture of things. So simulations can be a great way actually to try and dispel some of those preconceptions in terms of whether it's good or bad. If you just keep pushing stuff in, what does that do? And you can do things with capturing lead times. There's really simple things as well. We do sometimes that kind of like whip exercise where you get people writing numbers 1 through 26 and A through Z and then doing them alternately and then having a conversation with people about how did that feel, and you get the kind of, it's pretty stressful trying to think about 2 things at the same time. And when you start kind of exploring that a little bit with people and then sharing some of the data that exists around context switching and how if you just keep shoving stuff in, rather than perhaps being a bit more disciplined around that and kind of only picking stuff up when you finish something, I think it starts to create that kind of insight that then people are more open to that. So I think there's different ways to do it, and the virtual environment has made that a little bit more challenging in some instances. But yeah, I think you've got to help people to kind of see a different way, because it's pretty hard coded in us that get started and then we'll be finished sooner. Don't know what you think, Keith.
Yeah, I think there's a link to productivity as well, beyond the context switching. So like you say, when we're running multiple things concurrently and we're switching between them, it's a very inefficient way, but it's also a very stressful way. And when we talk with clients, particularly those engaged in knowledge work, whereas in operations and manufacturing, we might talk about safety in the context of accidents. Mm-hmm. Typically in knowledge work, it's about mental health and challenges, and that's almost always associated with overwork and pressure and unsustainable working practices, which comes from largely from the push mentality. So
yeah, I liked what you said, Keith, because with COVID, psychological and emotional safety for people has been a big topic recently, and a lot of people started seeing psychologists and whatnot. And I think what we do with you guys and with the Kanban method all together is we actually help people work in a more humane way, if you will, and deal with overburdening, not just from the work itself, but emotionally and psychologically. So I really liked what you said. And Angeline, back to what you mentioned, you mentioned simulations. What kind of simulations do you use? Is it board games? I've seen a lot of those, or is it digital? How do you do it?
There's different ones. I think you can look at digital simulations in the physical world. In some of the academies that we run, there's sort of simulations, physical simulations that the teams do, and they kind of role play, just free fall, push system, and then a pull system. I think, Keith, you've done some work actually in the Kanbanize instance, doing some simulations of that. So yeah, a mixture of both.
Yeah, moving away, we find physical simulations help. Physical simulations help people feel and experience things, and builds a sense of engagement with the activity that is really helpful for them as they reflect on what they've learned and what it means in practice. The COVID situation drove us to look for alternative ways, and with one of our clients, we actually used Kanbanize to run remote simulations, but still had some kinesthetic activity. So we essentially set up a process that had a defined output and a requirement and a set of inputs and transformations that were taking place at each process step. And then we simply contrasted what happens when everyone's just in a race to do as much as they can and stuff's being pushed in. And then what happens when we move to more of a pull system in conjunction with the control of work in progress. And that really helps people understand how it feels different, what's underneath it, and some of the results that we can expect from doing that. And that feels very powerful generally for people.
Yeah.
I think the advantage of that digital one that you did, Keith, as well, was when we talk about knowledge management, it's sort of, in some way, it's a little bit more applicable to the knowledge management space. Sometimes the physical ones are quite rooted in you're making a product or you're physically doing a product. So people can go away with yeah, but that doesn't apply to me, right? Because I'm not physically making something, I'm writing a report or I'm doing some analysis. So I think we would want to explore a bit more some of those digital simulations to help people in that knowledge management space really get how it applies to them.
All right, guys, thanks for that. Really interesting stuff. I think what you alluded to a little bit earlier was systems thinking and local versus global optimizations, and how pushing work into the system keeps everybody busy, but not necessarily leads to any productivity. And I'm curious as to what you're seeing when you typically go into a client. Do you see them operating more out of push, which means these people, they have 8 hours a day. I need to plan every hour for them. I need to tell them what to do and not waste any productivity by people sitting there idle? Or do you rather see your clients, before you start working with them, focused on the whole, focused on the big picture, making progress on their projects and programs and portfolios, whatever, and not necessarily digging into the details of how much every individual is working? What do you typically see, and what has worked historically for our clients, the one or the other?
I think there's an interesting paradox that's going on, and there's a translational issue, I think, in that when we initially talk with clients, they talk about their current performance and how they need to improve, and they're talking about productivity generally. And then when we start working with clients, often what they're ending up looking at is efficiency and how well they're using the resources that they've got around them. And that drives them to maximize utilization, which we know results in work waiting. And often with the clients that we work with, the cost of waiting and the cost of delay is significantly bigger than the cost of the resource or the people available to them to do the work. And so they sort of confuse productivity with efficiency often and aim to maximize efficiency at the expense of productivity and throughput. And so that translational error compounds itself because our clients then often use push systems to maximize utilization.
I was going to say, I think it's harder in knowledge management as well for people to observe that that's such an issue. And I think it's more well understood in manufacturing, and people talk about things like standard hours as a measure. And if you just chase standard hours, it doesn't necessarily translate to throughput. And you might see that visibly by WIP building up in certain places in your factory. Whereas in knowledge management, you don't really see that kind of that WIP building up. So I think it's sort of like a hidden inefficiency and waste that people don't realize. And they think that by measuring utilization or looking through that lens, that their world is going to get better, but they're not seeing the hidden costs of that, which is the overburden, the stress, the lack of productivity because stuff isn't flowing through your processes for that knowledge work. So I think generally, when we go into clients, it's probably more like that than the aligned piece, but I think it's harder and it's not as visible. So hopefully we can help people to make that a bit more visible.
Yeah, Angeline, I'm very happy you mentioned utilization, because actually Donald Reinertsen talks about utilization a lot. And he says that after a certain point, if you go above that point in utilization, like if you operate on 90% utilization, on 100% utilization, you are inherently much slower to respond to the needs of the market just because you have no slack in the system. And it's counterintuitive. A lot of managers will hate to see somebody idle just because they're losing productivity, as Keith said. But actually, if you have some people that are idle or on the bench, as some say, maybe doing a training, that maybe doing a self-reading or something like that, ready to jump into a project, but not working on a project right now, this actually enables agility within the teams, within the companies. So utilization 100% is actually bad. It's not the opposite as people usually think. So I'm very happy you touched that point. And actually, when talking about utilization and planning people by the hour, I myself often compare that to Taylorism. The Industrial Revolution, people doing small jobs for a certain amount of time without necessarily thinking about it, much like robots. I don't think this works in knowledge work, not at all. I think it's dangerous, but I'm curious as to whether you share my views on the Taylorism parallel. What do you guys think? Do you agree or not?
I think it's a really interesting parallel, and I think probably in our past we might have been accused of doing something similar with people.
I'll see what you're referring to there, Keith.
But I think it's right as well. In that, I think if we think about the differences with that time where that theory and approach span from, repetitive work, very clear when the work was complete, and that sort of led to more scientific thinking around what is the work content of this product, and how can we take time out, and how can we maximize utilization. Knowledge work, and particularly in the world we're in now, is totally different, isn't it? When is that work done? When someone decides it's finished, fundamentally. And we can say, well, it's when it's good enough, but it's never perfect, so it could always be better. So the good enough question comes to what's it for, what's the purpose, what are the requirements, and how can we define when the work's been complete. And if we start from that point, then it makes no sense to manage people's time to this degree. I would say the counter to that is, because we're all human, we all are used to working to a rhythm and to a cadence and to a calendar and to some form of clock. So I think the challenge becomes, how do we bound time and manage work within some bounded time without going so narrow and so tight that people are constrained?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think some structure can be helpful, but it's a bit of a sort of a fallacy. I think people feel they've got some sense of control if they've, we've got that kind of hour by hour tracking, but it's not really control, because there's so much sort of uncertainty and complexity, ambiguity in some of the kind of the knowledge management work that people might be doing. It's a passing, fleeting thing that you can create a plan that you think is half reasonable and it probably isn't. So yeah, I'd agree. I hadn't thought of it, comparing it back to Taylorism before, but it's yeah.
So I'm sure somebody will listen to our conversation and will say, yeah, right. You Agile guys, you always bash on estimating and planning people's time by the hour, but that's all we've got. Do we have something better than this? And some people might be willing to learn and might be willing to take their organizations from a push to pull, but how would you recommend they start? At what level in the organization? Should it be a top-down approach? Should it be a bottom-up approach? Should we start in the middle with middle management? What have you seen in your experience to work better?
Yeah, I mean, in a big organization, it's pretty hard to, at the team level, to make that shift if there's not alignment above. And I sort of worked in a role where I was looking at a portfolio level, and you could, back to our overburden and stressed position earlier on, you had people sort of, were trying to do the work, and just, everyone above them was telling them this was the most important, that was the most important, you've got to pick that up now. And it just desperately needed some intervention to make sure there was some discipline around that pull, not just, just start everything at once. So I think that's quite an important condition. I guess I've been in environments where we've sort of been in a bit of a bubble, and we've maybe had a bit of latitude that's given us some air cover. So we, at a sort of a middle part of the organisation, have managed to make a bit of a shift in that direction. But I think, in a big organisation, it's really challenging if, you've got commitments are being made at the top of the organisation that, we will start that thing. It's really hard for a team to turn around and say, that's not right, I'm only going to pull my work in. So I think, it's but that can be, that shouldn't stop us from trying to do experiments at a working level, but I think it will come to a point where it gets stifled without that alignment.
I think that's exactly right. I think there's we get the benefit from the top level, and people are a product of their environment, and if work is being pushed from the top into teams, then it's always going to be a challenge. It's hard to change at that level, though, without starting with where the work's actually done. So I think there's sort of benefit in starting small where teams are and helping teams focus on the things they control, because I think that then creates a better quality of discussion at the interface. When work comes in, can this team pick it up or can they not, based on everything else they've got around them? Mm-hmm. And our experience is that sort of quick feedback, quick learning, and that feeling of making progress and moving towards a better state can become quite infectious in organizations, and it then provides a reason for others to change. And so we sort of have to manage both, but recognize that when we do it in small teams, we're prone to that sub-optimization. The teams feel better, they feel more in control, but the organization's still not going to get the results it wants until we manage at that system level. So it's a real complicated web.
And I've seen it have a really powerful impact. I mean, it sort of, I can think of examples where it sort of sent shockwaves, really, where a decision is taken at that sort of senior level to effectively not pull another piece of work or not push another piece of work into the system because we're sort of full. And then it was like, really, you know, it was such a kind of an unusual thing to do, but I think it was helpful, and hopefully they're sort of continuing on that path. But yeah, it's I think both, as Keith says, which sounds a bit of a cop out, but I think you don't necessarily realise the benefits that the team might feel unless you've got some kind of alignment with the senior level.
Yeah, I would always recommend to start as high in the hierarchy as you possibly can. Mm. Of course, if we talk about huge corporations, that's just not possible, or very rarely possible, I should say. But whoever in the senior executives we could attract as a sponsor or as a champion, that's definitely a great prerequisite for further success onwards. I definitely agree. And you guys mentioned pushing work from the top down, people going crazy, being overburdened. I think that's the reality for a lot of companies out there. And this results in all sorts of dysfunctions. People hiding work, or people finishing work when it's not actually finished, delivering defective products and whatnot. I mean, all sorts of things. What have you seen in your experience in terms of dysfunctions that have been caused by the push behavior of the senior management in certain companies?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take this, Keith, or I can.
You've mentioned a few of them, Dimitar. I think there's a really important one, and it's and you touched on it, and it's really subtle but massively powerful, and that's the speed of feedback. So there becomes, when we have high levels of work around us and we're pushing stuff, when it leaves our team and goes to another one, if that product is defective or good, by the point in time at which we learn about that, well, we might never learn about that, because the point in time at which some team discovers it downstream, we've moved on and we're doing different things. And the one thing that we hear from clients more often than not is, if we want to go faster, then the quality is going to decrease. That's their mental model. Speed means poorer quality. And we always say, no. Speed means much better quality, because you reduce the feedback loops and the time to feedback. So the quicker we can get feedback on whether our work is good or bad, the easier it is to adapt and change what we're doing today to make it better. And obviously, the less exposed we are to changes in the external environment, be they inside the organization or outside. And so I think we see quite a lot of this fallacy of, I'm going to take longer, and I'm going to do a really good job of inspecting in quality into this. And if you guys have to wait a bit longer because we're inspecting to make sure it's right, then that's good for everyone. And we try and flip that stuff around and say, come on, we all know that when we get faster feedback, quality improves and we reduce the work. So.
Yeah, you remind me of something which my mentor, in the beginning of my lean journey 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, I should say, my mentor told me a story about the German car manufacturers versus the Japanese car manufacturers. And he quoted Mercedes. He's German, by the way. He said, Mercedes, they were proud that they were investing, let's say, 200 hours after the car is out of the manufacturing line to eliminate defects. And that's why the German cars were so high quality. Versus the Japanese, they spend 0 hours to fix issues after the car is out of the production line, because they built the quality in. It's one of their ideas, one of their principles, to build quality in, exactly what you're saying. And it's also what my mentor told me. If you have too many defects, it means you're pushing too hard. You need to slow down to go faster. And, not just slowing down for the sake of slowing down, but slowing down to exactly fix the feedback issues that you mentioned, to fix the underlying causes of these defects coming up. So I completely agree with you. My experience with Kanbanize, by the way, has been exactly like this. And for example, we don't wait for customer issues to pile up to start fixing them. We have, of course, we try to eliminate all issues before they actually reach the customer, but it's not always possible. So when a customer complains, hey, this is not working, we stop the line, just as the car manufacturers do, at least Toyota does. We fix the issue and then we resume the line because that's how it's much less expensive. The cost of fixing a defect, whether that's software or manufacturing, it doesn't matter, increases with the time that passes between the actual origination and the time you start working on it. So the sooner you fix it, the cheaper it is, right?
I think that's right. I think the other thing, particularly in knowledge work, that we've seen is we see lots of organizations creating reviews where experienced people come together and review the quality of the work produced by the team. And we see rather fewer organizations have those experienced people coach the people doing the job to go in a useful direction before they start. So organizations typically think they're building in quality by inspecting, and whereas if they were investing in coaching and sharing knowledge and experience before work started, that would probably be a cheaper, better investment for them. And I remember, Angeline, we had a number of discussions in previous roles on a particular project where one department was absolutely convinced that the quality of their work would increase and the whole program would go faster if they could have more time to do their peer reviews. And our view was, it's definitely going to take longer, it's definitely going to cost more, and the quality may improve.
Yeah.
Not a great outcome for us. So.
Yeah. I really like what you said. Yeah, please go ahead, Angeline. Yeah.
I was just going to say on the dysfunctions thing, I'm reminded of Lencioni and his 5 dysfunctions of a team, and there's quite a few of those that we've seen. And I'm struck by the, we talk about sort of accountability and commitment, that I think sometimes I've observed, or I guess we've observed, as stuff gets pushed in, there's you'll get what you get. And there's sort of, we talk about this learned helplessness that can sometimes come across, that it's like, well, I don't feel like I've got any control over the work that we're being asked to do. Someone's made up a date, someone's committed something on our behalf, and so you don't get those great benefits of that sort of commitment and accountability that you might get if people feel better able to control their own work. And ultimately, that from a trust point of view, that's really damaging in terms of the relationships in the organization. So I think there's a fair spattering of those dysfunctions that Lencioni talks about, that you kind of see with people are just continuing to push work in and not really think about principles of flow and how we better control that. So yeah.
Great point, Angeline. I really loved it. If the teams are not owning, if they're not committed to what they're supposed to work on, you will never ever see a high performance team to get stuff done quickly with high quality. I think it's a prerequisite. Otherwise, it's just taking ages and people are disengaged and quite often leave. Actually, it's a whole plethora of issues out there that are caused by something that people sometimes are not even realizing it is happening. So great conversation. One thing I wanted to ask you guys is, how do we plan projects? How do we plan capacity if this traditional way of doing it is not that great? Or at least that's what we've been preaching today. So how do I actually do it? I have a project, it starts tomorrow. How the heck do I know when it's about to get done? How do you do it with your clients?
Leave that with you, Angeline. That sounds difficult.
I mean, it's pretty challenging. I kind of I remember being asked to lead a program and thinking, God, I don't know how the hell, I mean, commitments had already been made to customers. And so that was sort of a bit of a moot point, but trying to kind of do any kind of planning just felt such a massive challenge. I think we do sometimes need to look at some guardrails that allow us to do some kind of rough approximation of shape and size. But I think it's dangerous when we take that to we're going to micromanage and do lots of detail, because it's just pointless. So I think it can be helpful to have some kind of outline structure that you can then is like a sort of a reference point that teams can plan against. As Keith alluded to earlier, we probably went a bit overkill in a previous life in terms of we had a bunch of engineers that we were asking to plan and probably hated us for it because of the focus we were putting in. But I guess we've shifted, we learned during that experience, and we've shifted since in terms of getting people to think about work in terms of a range of factors. So not just it's going to take me this many minutes or hours, but like the complexity, the uncertainty. We work with clients on looking at, we talk about decision flows, but understanding learning that needs to be gained in order to be able to move us forward in a certain direction. And back to our context switching piece, if you're trying to work on all of those things at once, then that's not a good idea. So we kind of maybe have some loose sense of capacity planning. But I think then when at a task level, it becomes more important for the teams to understand what work they think they want to do in a period, and to think about managing their work in progress and not picking up everything at once, and kind of trying to be more disciplined about that. We were working with a client in the last couple of weeks, and I was sort of quite pleased that sort of we were reinforcing the mantra of, stop starting stuff and start finishing stuff, was we were talking about. And we were talking about, when do you pick up your next piece of work? And they were saying, well, when I've done a piece of work, and trying to get more into that discipline, that thinking way around how I'm going to plan my capacity, and not being so fixated on I've got 32 hours a week that I'm going to plan all of my work in, because it's a little bit, you don't know that piece of work is going to take you how many hours or not, because you don't really know what that activity is that you're going to do. So long answer, but it's we have to work with clients depending on their context to try and navigate through that. You're on mute, Keith.
You're on mute, Keith, yeah. The most frequently used phrase in 2020.
It was my gift to you.
It was an awesome statement, I'm sure.
There's a bit of background noise. I think there's a lot in that, actually, in that we see organizations that try to do act responsibly, but their translation of that is we're going to plan in line with past experience. We're going to plan based on demonstrated capability to deliver programs of this size and shape. And yet every one of those programs was unique to its time and its context. And within that was quite a lot of waste and quite a lot of whatever was going on. And so rationally, it feels like that's a very responsible thing, but it's a left to right planning approach, which may or may not be what the customer or the market or the world needs. So we're very strong advocates of right to left planning. What is it that we're trying to achieve, and why, and who for? What do they want? And then looking at, well, how will we achieve that? And it sort of breaks a little bit the paradigm from this is our process, this is our approach, this is what we do, to be more value and customer focused. What is it that we need to do to create value? And then the point Angeline made about, if we understand that, then we can look at what work is required in the short term to do that, and what's a helpful direction of travel. And our goal really on programs is to retire risk and uncertainty quickly. So another way of putting that is to learn quickly. Mm-hmm. So we would typically say, what direction are we going? What is it that we don't know about that direction? What is it that we need to do to know those things? And let's plan that work right now. And we might lay that out into iterations, sprints, increments, or time slices, or that might be a sort of continuous approach that we might take. But the key thing is that we stop and reflect and look at opportunities to change the way we're working, to go faster and to deliver better at frequent intervals. So we're sort of trying to marry this big picture, this is the direction of travel, what is it we don't know, with the flexibility and agility to do things, learn, reflect, adapt, change, on the premise that hopefully we will go faster each time we do that because we're addressing the fundamental process issues.
A lot of great stuff, guys. I really, I want to summarize what I heard just so I make sure I got it all right. You said you want to focus on what the organization really wants to achieve and then work backwards with some high-level planning, as Angeline mentioned, some high-level milestones, not broken down into tiny details, but like 3 months or 6 months or a year, we want to achieve this. And then you work from that into smaller iterations or continuous flow with the teams actually doing the work with the goal and the focus to learn fast, whether this high-level planning has any chance of actually turning out to be true. And the sooner you discover that the plan, the high-level plan is good or inaccurate, the sooner you can actually adjust. Is that what you guys are saying?
That's a great summary.
Yes.
And I really loved that because Keith, you also mentioned risk, and I take pride in one quote from myself that the best risk management strategy is flow optimization. I don't think there's a better risk strategy than actually delivering stuff in a predictable way and learning continuously. There's no point in putting up a spreadsheet with likelihood of risk occurring and impact of risk occurring. Yeah, it's all there. And then what you do about it? What do you do about it? You optimize flow. So we don't even do these kind of things. I'm not saying it's useless, but I'm yet to see, the applicability of project management, risk management by the book. Yeah. All right, guys, we're approaching the end of the program today. And I want to make sure that our listeners can reach out to you and maybe work with you, get a consultation. Maybe they have a problem that you can help them with. So what's the best way for them to reach you?
Oh, well, you can contact us via our website or via LinkedIn. So p4learninglab.com or Project 4 Learning Lab on LinkedIn. Our contact details are on there. We're very happy to talk with people to share our experience. So we're very happy with initial consultations or anything. We've spent many years making mistakes. So our value proposition is that hopefully we can help people not follow the same path. So.
Thank you, guys. I'm sure you can do a great job with any potential client because I know what we've achieved already. You have some amazing clients, big corporations. You're doing great progress with them. So I encourage everybody who's listening and doubting whether they should get in touch, please do get in touch. Keith and Angeline are stellar consultants and they can help you out. All right, guys, thank you very much for today. It was really, really nice having you. I enjoyed the conversation and I hope we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, our pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.